So I've been covering John MacArthur, pastor of Grace Community Church, and their situation now in Los Angeles County. They've continued to meet indoors for the past several months in spite of government restrictions out there. And last week I highlighted this article, John MacArthur's church has multiple COVID cases, staff pressured to keep silent. And this is a report that was actually given by a reporter called Julie Roys. And so basically she's claiming that Grace Community Church is having a bit of a cover-up of COVID-19. They're really pressuring people not to talk about the cases that are taking place there at their church. Now, it's interesting looking at this story in more detail, and I know some of you had comments about that specific report, but I did notice today an article also from around that time that says GCC pastor accuses journalist of lying about outbreak reporting. And so this report is really reporting on the reporting. And I find that interesting. Again, Julie Roys here on the right is the reporter who broke the story about Grace Community Church. And on the left is Phil Johnson, who is an elder, a pastor at Grace Community Church. And I'll read some of this here. It says, following her report about COVID-19's alleged continued impact at John MacArthur's Grace Community Church, investigative journalist Julie Roys is facing criticism from a pastor at the California megachurch. Early Sunday, Roys published an article titled, Members of John MacArthur's Church Say They're Being Pressured Not to Report New COVID Outbreak. In it, she details an interview with a church leader and shares social media posts describing active coronavirus cases within the congregation. When a Twitter user asked elder and pastor Phil Johnson to explain what was happening at GCC, he replied that Roys is lying and prints scandal-mongering twaddle. Julie Roys describes denial and coercion at GCC. A GCC leader who requested anonymity told Roys that numerous new cases of COVID-19 have been linked to recent gatherings at the Sun Valley Church, yet staff and members are being urged to keep them quiet. The leader, who himself is symptomatic, said he felt pressured to attend in-person gatherings at GCC and is now paying the price health-wise. He described a mostly mask-free campus, attendees sitting close to one another, and a leader, MacArthur, who continues downplaying COVID-19 as just a flu. I spoke with multiple members of GCC this week who said they were scared of speaking out about the outbreak for fear of retribution, writes Roys. Some said they feared losing their jobs, others said they feared being ostracized and losing their community. The journalist shares several recent Facebook posts with names often blurred for privacy from church members who've tested positive for coronavirus. One reveals that a lot of members of the church's Filipino ministry are symptomatic, including a leader and member who've been hospitalized. Dr. William Varner, a professor who leads a GCC fellowship group, posted on December 16th that he has COVID-19. A blogger known as Modern Day Zorro details a December 8th GCC Christmas party that allegedly led to 7 coronavirus cases. When Roys asked her anonymous source about that account, he confirmed the party occurred, but added, John MacArthur will never admit that number. I have no doubt that it is true, but any church leader who publicly affirms that will be looking for a new job. This part of the article gives Phil Johnson's perspective. Phil Johnson takes issue with the article and its author. On December 18th, GCC pastor Phil Johnson tweeted about recent deaths in his family that weren't COVID-related, but were made nightmarish by tyrannical restrictions. He adds, so please don't at me with relentless told-you-so tweets about the current rise in COVID cases. The vast majority will recover. Asked about news of an outbreak at GCC, Johnson responded, well, for one thing, Ms. Roys is lying. Not only did she not contact me for comment, She blocked me months ago on social media. I'm not complaining. I'm happy not to have to read her scandal-mongering twaddle, and I rarely do, even when someone sends me a link. Not lying, Royce replied, sharing the email she'd sent GCC requesting comment. When she didn't receive a reply in her admittedly tight time frame, she proceeded to publish, saying she felt obligated to do so before Sunday's services so GCC members could make an informed decision about the risks of attending. Although Southern California is currently the pandemic's U.S. epicenter, Los Angeles County has lifted its ban on indoor worship. Though officials still recommend meeting outdoors, they acknowledge that recent Supreme Court decisions have prioritized religious liberties. So I thought this article was pretty fair and outlines both sides of the story, both points of view from Julie Royce and Phil Johnson. I will say, in looking at Twitter, that I can tell it has become a bit personal between them. And really the comment I want to make about all of this is just about that fact that as humans, things get very personal for us. They also get very emotional, and this whole situation with coronavirus and the pandemic is very emotionally charged. So it's really hard sometimes to come down to the truth of a situation. You have people that are emotional about situations they faced with the coronavirus themselves, or with loved ones who maybe their health has been at risk, or they've even lost someone due to COVID-19, which is very, very sad and tragic. On the other hand, you have people that are very emotional about their religious liberties, and rightly so. Those are important to us and they need to be protected, as the Supreme Court has shown. But I will say, in all of this, you can see in this situation, with a situation like Grace Community Church, it's hard sometimes to get to the bottom line truth because there are a lot of factors at play. It is a really big church. That's something we have to keep in mind. And considering the size of the church and how much they've been meeting indoors, it really hasn't been a huge outbreak from anything we've seen. At the same time, is there some level of outbreak at Grace Community Church? That might be the case. Certainly LA County is seeing a lot of rise in coronavirus cases during this time. So it wouldn't surprise me if there are a growing number of cases at this church. But what I'm saying in all of this is that for humans, it gets very personal. People have their own interests at play, even when they're reporting something. Julie Royce, her goal obviously is to break stories and highlight maybe things that aren't being done in the most effective, optimal way, or to even point out faults in organizations and with individuals. That's what she's trying to do as a reporter. Grace Community Church also has a vested interest in protecting their privacy and protecting how they handle a situation. So this is just the reality of being human. I think it's sad, though, to see it devolve into a personal battle and people being angry with one another and attacking one another personally. But that sadly is how things tend to go as humans. So we just need to be praying. My ultimate goal in all of it is to come to truth and to promote truth. And if there is something that's dangerous, of course, I think we want to take reasonable precautions. At the same time, there are dangers, there are things threatening our religious liberty as well, and that also needs to be protected, as well as the reality that when you have a lot of heavy-handed restrictions and lockdowns, that also can have negative outcomes too. So there's a lot of factors we have to keep in mind on top of the personal element that we certainly all deal with, the fact that this is emotional for all of us. So I just wanted to share this article with you, as well as some of my thoughts in follow-up to the article that I shared last week on what was reported to be a cover-up at the church. Of course, I'd like to hear what you think in the comments below, but we want to try to keep those comments constructive and helpful to conversation. But thank you so much for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.